Let me ask you a question. What if everything you expected from a savior, everything your people had hoped for centuries, turned out to be completely wrong? What if the king you were waiting for wasn't a king at all, at least not in the way anyone imagined? To really get why, we need to go back, way back, to a single pivotal moment in history. Okay, so picture this. The year is around 47 AD. We're in a synagogue in Pisidian Antioch, a city deep in what we now call Turkey. It's the Sabbath, and two travelers, Paul and Barnabas, have just been invited to say a few words. And you have to imagine the room. It is filled with people just clinging to a promise, this ancient, centuries-old hope. And what Paul is about to say? Well, it's going to challenge that hope to its very core. You see, to understand the shockwaves Paul's message created, we first have to get what was in the hearts and minds of everyone in that room. This wasn't just some casual belief. It was the deepest, most powerful desire of an entire nation. For the Jewish people, their entire history was really defined by one glorious moment. The kingdom of King David. That was the high point, their golden age. But ever since that kingdom was lost way back in 586 BC, it had just been one long, painful story of being ruled by someone else. The Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and now the Roman Empire. So for centuries, the one burning question was, who is going to deliver us and bring back the glory days of David? And this is so important to understand. Their hope wasn't for some quiet spiritual guru. No way. They were waiting for a Messiah, a Christ, who would be a political and military powerhouse. They wanted someone who would physically dry out the Romans, reestablish their nation, and put them back on top, just like in the age of David and Solomon. That was the hero everyone was looking for. So, into this world just boiling with political expectation walks a carpenter from Nazareth. And the collision between what people desperately wanted and who Jesus actually was, well, it was absolutely seismic. I mean, the contrast could not be more dramatic. They expected a political king, but Jesus kept talking about a spiritual kingdom. They were looking for a military victor, but he showed up as a servant who was going to suffer. They dreamed of an earthly throne, but his path led straight to a Roman cross. He was the complete opposite of the hero they had been praying for. You know, it's all summed up perfectly in his own words. My kingdom is not of this world. With that one sentence, he was basically rejecting the very role people were trying to force on him. This wasn't just a minor tweak to the plan. This was a completely different mission altogether. So you can imagine the result, right? Deep, deep disappointment, total confusion. And for a lot of people, that disappointment just hardened into anger and outright rejection. Here was a man who could perform miracles, yet he refused to use that power to build the kingdom they wanted so badly. To them, it must have felt like a total betrayal of the promise. Okay, so let's get back to Paul and that synagogue. He has a huge task ahead of him. He has to somehow explain how this crucified man, this apparent failure, was actually the Messiah they'd been waiting for. He literally has to redefine the very idea of victory. And this brings us to the absolute heart of his sermon. If Jesus wasn't a conquering king with an army and a throne, then what was the proof? What was the ultimate, undeniable sign that he was who he claimed to be? Paul's answer just flips everything on its head. The proof wasn't a crown, it was an empty tomb. The ultimate evidence of his authority wasn't some political victory, it was a victory over death itself, the resurrection. And to really drive this point home, Paul draws this incredibly powerful comparison. He tells them, look at King David, your greatest hero, the king you all want to bring back. He died and his body decayed in a tomb. But he says God raised Jesus, and his body did not see decay. This is something far greater than any earthly king could ever achieve. This is the sign of a totally different kind of king and a different kind of kingdom. But here's the thing. The resurrection wasn't just proof. It was the key that unlocked an entirely new way of understanding our relationship with God. It opened up a new path to what the Bible calls righteousness. So Paul introduces this world-changing concept, justification by faith. Now, the first thing to know is that this is a legal term. It doesn't mean we suddenly become perfect, flawless people overnight. It means that in the courtroom of heaven, God declares us righteous or not guilty. And this verdict, it's not based on our performance, not on how well we follow the rules. It's based entirely on our faith in what Jesus did for us. This whole path kind of follows a simple logic. First, you've got the problem, trying to become perfect by following the law of Moses. It's impossible. We all fall short. Second, you have the solution.
Jesus' death on the cross acts as the payment, the atoning sacrifice for all our failures. And third, the action on our part. We are declared righteous simply by trusting, by having faith that his sacrifice was enough.
But why is all this even necessary, right? Why do we need to be declared righteous in the first place? Well, that brings us to Paul's definition of the core human problem, sin. Now, this is fascinating. The Greek word that's used for sin is hamartia. And what's so interesting is that it wasn't originally a religious word at all. It's an archery term. It literally means to miss the mark, like missing the bullseye on a target. So think about it like this. God created us like an archer shooting an arrow with an intended purpose, an intended direction. Sin is the state of that arrow flying off course, missing the very target it was made for. It's about living a life that just misses the whole point of our existence.
So missing the mark really means a few things. It's about not going the way we were meant to go. It's doing the stuff we know we shouldn't do. And it's failing to do the things we know we should. And ultimately, the consequence of being off target is a broken relationship with the archer, with God himself.
And this brings us right to the climax of Paul's whole sermon there in Antioch. He reveals the true purpose of this unexpected Messiah. And it wasn't about politics at all. It was about forgiveness. The real mission of the Messiah wasn't to fix Israel's temporary political problem with Rome. It was to solve humanity's universal and eternal problem, the problem of missing the mark, the problem of sin that separates every one of us from God. And Paul just lands his final knockout point with this incredible promise. I mean, look at what it says. Through him, everyone who believes is set free. This is the real gift he's offering, not freedom from Roman taxes or Roman soldiers, but a much deeper, more profound freedom. Freedom from sin itself. And that leaves us with a really profound thought to wrestle with. So often we think of righteousness, being a good person, as a ladder we have to climb, something we have to achieve through our own effort. But Paul's sermon presents it as a gift that we just receive. So if righteousness is a gift, not an achievement, how does that change everything about what it means to be good?